You spoke about productivity and, again, in your time in office, it's down 4.6%. The Reserve Bank Governor has made it clear that to accommodate wage rises without further interest rate hikes, we need to increase productivity.
Absolutely we do.
What's your plan on that?
We have a range of plans on that. Infrastructure investment is obviously one, and we're making sure that that be got right. One of the reasons we've done the review, you can't have a Commonwealth Government with 800 infrastructure projects. It's not the role of Commonwealth Government to do roundabouts. It's the role of the government to do things like I did yesterday, the second airport at Badgerys Creek, which, as you know, I spoke about in my first speech almost 30 years ago, and I've been a strong advocate. They're the changes that drive through productivity. We need to skill up our workforce. 180,000 fee-free TAFE places underway now, 300,000 in our budget. Cheaper childcare is about boosting productivity. The low-hanging fruit is in our economy in terms of the labour market is putting women at the centre of our economic agenda. Cheaper childcare will be good for the 3 Ps that you can have for growth: participation, productivity and population. It's good for all 3. So we have identified through our investments that we've prioritised, whilst being fiscally responsible, we've identified the areas both before we were elected but since then as well. What are the areas we need to invest in that will drive productivity, that will drive growth?
All right, I'll tell you who else has identified some things you can do in productivity. The Productivity Commission. Now, that report came out and was kind of set aside. So, I mean, it talked about tax reform and IR reform. Do you have any plans for a second-term agenda in any of these areas?
Well, we'll wait and we'll announce our second-term agenda in the lead-up to what we hope will be our second term. One of the things that my government has done is to lay out in an orderly way what we were doing when we were doing it. We outlined very clearly our agenda for this term, and we've been going through putting those measures in place. I think it's fair to say that in our first year, if you look at what we promised to do, we have put almost all of that legislation in place. We have some unfinished business with the Housing Australia Future Fund legislation next week. But we have put in place those measures, and that will, I think, certainly be a pretty big agenda for this term. The job of reform, I gave a speech at, I think it was an Oz conference before the election, where I said, I quoted John Howard saying the job of reform is never done, and certainly it's not. You constantly have to be looking towards how do you drive the economy, how do you continue to have change to shape it in Australia's national interest.
That report talked about areas of state responsibility as well, zoning law changes, road user charges. Is it time for you to press the state governments on some of this stuff?
Well, we are through the National Cabinet. I must say that on some of those issues, when we raise them, it would be good to get a bit more back in from everyone for doing it, because they aren't easy. I mean, one of the things that we've got connected with the Housing Australia Future Fund is the Housing Supply and Affordability Council. Now, you can't address housing issues like overnight. It takes time. But the big issue we all know is supply. And one of the big issues with supply, and some of the hypocrisy, it must be said, of the Greens political party, is they've never seen a medium density development, let alone a high density development, that they wanted to support. And we need to address those issues. We need increased density along transport corridors in particular. They are things that we need reform on. And one of the things I've said...
A high-rise in Marrickville?
Too. I have supported on the record projects like, it's called Revolution, right next to Marrickville Airport, Marrickville train station. When I remember a group coming to see me in my electorate office in Marrickville, and they were like, "This is terrible." And I was like, why is Why is it terrible? This is a good density. It wasn't too high. It wasn't in excess. A fantastic development. Similarly, the old Marrickville Hospital site was developed by Mirvac, to give credit where credit's due, to put in a library that's won awards, a bit of open space, but really good density, really good quality development. I'm not for let it rip, bad developments, in inappropriate locations. But you can have increased density, particularly along transport corridors. I'm on the record of doing so. I've done so in my own electorate consistently. There's a proposal at the moment before the Inner West Council, pretty close to Parramatta Road at Taverners Hill. It's a good proposal. The density that's around Lewisham in my own electorate is good. So I'm happy to do that. And one of the things that I think the National Cabinet can do is that in areas of federation reform, sometimes state governments can use the fact that National Cabinet has a decision to say, well, we have to do this even where things are politically difficult. So I've spoken certainly with the premiers and chief ministers about that, and National Cabinet is working well.